share. And then I'm starting a watch party together with my friends or a group. I'd love for you to do the same thing. Get your friends engaged in the American Soundbite and, well, everything that we do. You have to make your own title. You could use, well, the same one, which is what I'm going to do today. But you're also free to use whatever title that you want. And then click start. It's literally simple. And there it goes. Boom! Now, the only other thing I have to check very quickly is just to make sure that we are indeed running on the YouTube. And in order to do that, I have to simply... Well, look at that. We are live on the YouTube. So welcome to everybody everywhere. Today is going to be a doozy, I tell you, a doozy of a show. And with that, we're pretty much 95, 98, 99% ready to go live. So here we go. You are listening to The American Soundbite, a podcast that features common sense thoughts of an everyday American. This is the start of the most valuable 10 minutes of your Father's Day. So congratulations on joining us if you are a father or you want to be a father, or, well, hey, happy Father's Day to everyone in our audience today. Before we start, if you don't mind, find that share button on whatever app that you're using, whether it's Apple Podcasts or it's, YouTube Live. Find the share button. Let your friends on social media, those people over there on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever, they need to learn about the American Soundbite. It will make them, well, more educated. It will make them more conversive, and it'll make them just a better joy to be around each and every day of your life. So I guarantee you'll benefit as much as they do. Today, it's not really a Father's Day special, but boy, do we have a doozy of a show for you. And let me tell you this. Our show today is all about this movement to defund the police or abolish the police or whatever the sentiment is around the country today. And that sentiment, that argument, that entire mission of defunding a government entity brings up a question. And if you saw the title of today's show, you know exactly what that question is. Is now the time to defund the IRS? That's right. The Internal Revenue Service, a tax collection and, well, basically the accounting department of the federal government. Should we defund it? Should we get rid of it? Do we need it at all? Well, I think it would be difficult to abolish the IRS. Because, well, ultimately, we need somebody to handle the accounting functions of government. The government does need to bring some funds in and obviously pay some funds out. However, it's, well, my viewpoint that the federal government should not, has no need to collect revenue directly from the people. The IRS should not be able to tax in any way the people of the United States. That's right. That's what I said. The IRS shouldn't be allowed to tax us. Well, tax us directly. And I'll explain that a little bit because some of you are scratching your heads and say, well, Dave, if the IRS isn't taxing us, the people, where are they getting the money from? Well, that's a great question. You see, today, in our federal government, most of the bureaucracies that exist, most of the departments, the money that we spend at the federal level is duplicated at the state level. And I would contend that we don't need a federal bureaucracy that is already being run at the state level. There's just no need for it. It's redundancy. It's duplication. It's unnecessary. So if we defund the IRS, if we don't let the IRS take money from the people individually, instead, Congress, by law, they pass a budget each and every year, which most years they don't do that. Think about that for a minute. By law, they're required to, but most years they don't. They're required to pass a budget each and every year. And then the IRS figures out, well, how do we get that revenue? We're going to tax the people, and here's the rate that we're allowed to tax the people, and therefore here's your bill. Well, instead, I would propose that the Congress comes up with a budget each and every year. Let's say in March of every year. Or maybe let's give them to April 15th. How's that? They have to publish a budget. That budget, rather than saying the IRS gets to collect it from the people, would say that we're going to collect that money from the states directly. We're going to go to the state of Ohio and the state of Indiana and the state of Arkansas, and we're going to say, based on the census, here's the amount of money that you owe. Here's the budget that goes along with it. April 15th. The governors, now this is a budget for the following year. The governors then have, let's call it 3 months to review that budget. And they look at that budget and they say, Department of Education, we're sending you money from our state to a Department of Education to come back to our state and tell us how to run our Department of Education. Yeah, we're not going to fund that. So we're scratching that from your budget. The Department of Transportation, we give you literally hundreds of millions of dollars from the state to the federal government every year that, because it comes out of our tax dollars, that you then turn around and you give back to us, the state, to pave the roads. But each time you do that, you have requirements on how we as the state have to behave. Well, we're going to give you this money if you ban smoking under age 21. Non-related, irrelevant, unconstitutional as well, by the way. But there's no need for that money to go to the federal government to come back to us to fix our own roads. So we're not going to give you that money. So the governors as a whole, an individual governor couldn't do that, but the governors as a group could go through and say, we really don't need to fund this department of the government. We don't really need to send the federal government this money or that money. And they could go back to Congress and say, okay, we've approved your budget with these changes. And that's what we're going to pay. Then the states can decide how they're going to tax their citizens. Remember, you already pay a state tax, whether it's an income tax or it's a sales tax or it's a property tax. However the states decide to collect their revenue, they would now be responsible to collect the revenue not just to run the state, but also to cover the bill that they have to pay to the federal government. It's a little bit more work, but the agency already exists within your state, so why do we need a federal bureaucracy? By the way, the IRS has something like 276,000 people working for it. We're paying payroll of 276,000 people to collect taxes when we already have at the state level agencies and staff and payrolls for people to collect taxes. We don't need the redundancy. So this would give, better control over federal spending to the governors, returning control from the federal government to the states, the way the Constitution intended, and it would let the states figure out how to collect the revenue that they need. If money is coming out of the state, going to the federal government, coming back to the state, that would stop because the governors would say, there's no reason to send it to you. You take a little bit off the top to pay, salaries of people to take it off the top and then send it back to us. We're just not going to send it to you to begin with. And so that brings us to, well, the main topic. Should we defund the IRS? And the answer is absolutely yes. The IRS doesn't need almost 300,000 employees. Did you know, by the way, that the IRS has an assault task force, a SWAT team, if you will? Why does the IRS need a law enforcement division at all? Their job is to collect taxes. Are they concerned about going and giving you an unpaid tax bill? Because if that was the case, wouldn't they just go to court and get a judge to say, oh, well, you know what, Dave Hyde needs to be arrested, and then tell, well, the local police to come and arrest me? The federal government is the spending, the control is so out of whack. Agencies that don't need law enforcement arms have law enforcement arms. Agencies that exist at the state level are replicated at the federal level, and it's just simply not needed. Plain and simple, we have too much government. And a big part of the too much government starts right at the IRS. So now that we've got all the news media and the lamestream media and everything going on social media talking about defunding the police, we really need to start talking about, should we defund the IRS? And what is the role and the responsibility of the IRS? And should we let the federal government replicate agencies and actions and tasks that are already conducted at the state level? Shouldn't we let the state control, let the state decide how to collect funds, and ultimately really let the state decide? While the federal government needs to, set the budget, tell us what they need, but shouldn't we really have the states, the governors, go over that budget and decide whether or not those are things that, as governors, as states, as individuals in this country, that we really want to be spending money on those things? Wouldn't it be a more responsible and more effective way to control our spending to have more people reviewing a budget, to have the people who are by law required to create the budget, but then have an outside entity, the group of governors collectively, review that budget and approve it, decide whether or not those things really need to be spent that way, and then to redirect that spending. The same way, by the way, it happens in corporations, right? There isn't just one guy that creates the budget and says, okay, here's where we're going to spend it. By the way, most of the money's going in my pocket. No. The accounting department creates the budget. They take it to the executive managers who review the budget, who in a lot of cases then take it to the board of directors who review it, make some modifications, and say, okay, yes, this is the budget. By the way, it's been changed some. We're not at the granular level, but at the big picture level, because we want to be the most effective and responsible with our spending. So having a group outside of the federal government reviewing that budget and approving that budget with changes would make us a more responsible, a more effective, a more fiscally responsible, country overall. And that's why we should defund the IRS. Something to talk about, something to think about a lot here on Father's Day, and certainly something that, deserves a lot of discussion amongst your family members and tomorrow at the water cooler when you're back at work. So, I want to wish everybody, truly, a very happy Father's Day. I hope you've got great weather and you're able to go outside and really enjoy it. Maybe you can turn the grill on and grill up some steak or some ribs. But most importantly, that you get to spend time with your loved ones and you get to just enjoy the day that's really meant for, you, the dads all over the world. You have been listening to the American Soundbite. This is a special Father's Day episode that features common sense thoughts of an everyday father. This has been the most valuable 10 minutes of your day. So congratulations on joining us. I am definitely very proud to have you as a listener. Hey, before I let you go, if you liked the content that we had today, if you liked the format of the show, if you like listening at all, click that like button. Let me know that you listened and that you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, any requests, or any criticism, anything at all, type it in the comment box. I will read those, I will respond to them, and hey, it'll even help me make the show better for you. While you're at it, that share button is right next to it. Let your friends on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snap, whatever, know that you listen to the American Soundbite, and they should too. Thanks a lot for listening. Hope you have a great day, and God bless. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a wrap. One of my very first political thoughts, independent political thoughts, not just following the right or following the left, doing what, everybody says you should do, was questioning the authenticity, questioning the overall need for the IRS. And over the time, I've refined my thoughts on this a little bit, but it's really comes down to the fact that we really don't need the federal government to be collecting revenue directly from the citizens. We should let the states decide how to collect that revenue and, just let the federal government spend it. It cuts a lot of, erroneous spending. It cuts a lot of unnecessary jobs. And, takes a huge amount of power and control away from the IRS. If you've ever known anybody or any business who has been through an audit, you know how unrealistic, unreasonable, and overpowering the IRS, the federal government, can be. And how, they just simply disregard the law because, we're the federal government and we don't care. Sue us if you don't like it. That's their attitude. And that's the attitude of, government that has gotten excessive. And that's why the IRS, among many others, should be defunded. Not quite abolished, but certainly dramatically shrank in size and give that control back to the states. Thanks a lot for watching. I really enjoy you being here on all of our streaming services.